It's the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Dikkers, talking this week with comedian and comic actor Matt Braunger. Matt, it seems like I'm seeing more of you around. I feel like I saw an ad for you doing a stand-up special, like a new one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so how are things going?
Good. It's been a journey because I that was one I kind of got impatient and shot and recorded myself. Hired a whole team, did it during a festival that I co-founded, and then spent about a year trying to get it set up somewhere. Finally did, and now it's finally coming out. Boy, about over a year and a half since I shot it. So
Wow.
it's
Great.
it took so long. I recorded a whole nother hour recently in Vermont on audio just to do it.
Do people still do stand-up CDs?
It's not necessarily. I would more call it an album because it's
Okay.
it's it's all streaming now. It's all internet radio and
Right.
it's all digital now. But yeah, that's huge. I feel like people get known more for their audio jokes than their listenability rather than their viewability, for sure. I actually have a bit about that time I was in a bar and I said, "Hey, can I get my check from you?" And the bartender said, "What's the name on the tab?" And I said, "Matt Braunger." And he went, "Oh, like the comedian." Literally.
He literally had no idea what you looked like.
Oh, nothing. And
It's
probably
so great.
greatest moment of my life. Side note. But yeah, it's pretty big.
A lot goes into that. So, do you have a team, or do like managers, producers get involved in that to design a badge or a cover? And is it like produced, or do you literally do the same thing you just did with your latest special, where you like bring in a sound recording team and just capture it?
Well, with the latest one, I did a thing with these guys that I work with a lot, an actual label called 800 Pound Gorilla, and they came in and just recorded it. And with the special, I needed a larger platform. Initially, I co-produced it with my management company, and so they did all the spreadsheet work and in terms of getting licenses and things like that and permits. And then it's interesting, the guy who filmed it, my DP, is a guy named Brian McKee, who I grew up with, who was a
Hmm.
cameraman. He's still living in Portland. And so he hired a crew for me. And I basically drew on Avalon's resources as mine. And so we kind of co-owned it. And then once it was edited and set and color corrected, all that jazz, we set it up with a company called Comedy Dynamics, which is basically like one of the kind of premier platforms in terms of specials. They do stuff all over the globe, and I partnered with them, and then they put it on all kinds of other platforms. So rather than kind of do the route of Netflix or Comedy Central or Showtime, uh, basically I did what Jim Gaffigan recently did with Noble Ape. He worked with Comedy Dynamics too, and it's kind of on over 100 platforms, or will be in the end. It's just kind of like we tend to think still in terms of the old way, in terms of networks, in terms of like, oh, where is it, who owns it,
Right.
and it's kind of not necessarily uh, you know like just mine, just theirs. It's just it's it's not as much money as I'd make setting it up on a traditional quote unquote network, but it'll be seen by so many more people, which is really exciting.
That's smart. And is it also then owned by you or by,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Mhm.
So it's like, as long as it's around. Now, I've found it's strange. A lot of these stand up specials will be on a network or whatever, and then you have to pay to see them. And then literally,
Right.
like 3 or 4 years later, they're all free on YouTube. And I don't know if that's just because people are
Yeah.
bootlegging them or what's the deal.
It's interesting. I think it's it comes down to it. Uh, the best of us, are kind of in this. It'd be a weird business to get into for the money, if that makes any sense.
Oh, no, I totally get you.
Because it's just you never imagine. I mean, we all know when we all know the time we really started getting like we first time we got a good check or whatever, but it mostly was that time where we quit our day jobs and then went, oh my god, I'm not I didn't lose my apartment. things are
Right.
still continuing on. I'm okay. Um, if you start making a ton of money from this, it really, speaking as myself, not that I've made a ton, but it feels weird. It feels really strange. So I think, anyway, long story long, I think once the rights get released to your special, you're still kind of like, hey, I just really want people to watch it, and that's kind of it. I don't it when I watch myself, when I go through the editing process, I hate seeing myself. I get like, I'm tired of the jokes. I'm obviously tired of my face and stuff, and just looking at myself, and it's you're kind of grateful that anyone even bothers, as much as you believe in the material and your ability and presence and all that jazz.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a philosophy I've been talking about a lot lately, which is just the benefit of building fans, not profits. And,
Hmm.
doing what you love and people being attracted to that and falling in love with that. And if you can get enough of those people, eventually, like, you can make a living off of it, but that's not, yeah, it would be weird to go into that for the money. It's like a long dues paying period.
Oh, it's insane. I love the story of how Bill Withers got started, where he was like working in Michigan or something, like on a factory line, like making toilets or something, and making a good living. And he was in a bar, and he was next to a promoter who was drinking and complaining about booking Lou Rawls. And he's like, that guy was 20 minutes late, and I'm paying that motherfucker. And he said an amount of money, and Bill Withers went, wait, what? You can make that much money singing? And he got into singing. And
Oh,
it's
that's
but
funny.
it's like that's the only example I've ever heard of that, where someone has kind of an ability and go, oh, I just like doing this. Oh wait, I can make that money. Okay, so in a sense, he kind of jumped into it for the profit because he knew he had a gift. But I feel like that's a unicorn of a story. There's no one who is kind of like, except for our mothers watching TV and going, oh, you're funnier than him or her. Why don't you get into this? No one does that. It's just
Yeah,
kind of something you do because you don't have a choice. You
right.
do it because you have to.
Well, let's talk about that for you. So, when did you start doing it, and when did you realize that it was something you had to do?
I was always a kind of an attention whore. I'm an only child, and I was definitely the class clown, and um, I really I was not so much that person who grew up loving stand up as much as I just really loved performance, and I loved uh, the rhythm and the cadence and the presence that a person can have in front of a camera or on screen or on stage, and I loved productions kind of coming together. So I was always doing plays growing up and things. And then when I was in Chicago, I got into improv and did that for about 2 years, and then started doing open mics kind of as a thing. I was like, oh, I've always wanted to do this, and this is something that people have told me I should be doing, and it just kind of clicked, and I fell in with a group of people who we didn't really have uh, a ton of ambition, but we went to this open mic every single Monday, and you'd sign up and you'd have 5 minutes, and we always try to do new stuff for the most part because we were always watching each other, and it's a weird corollary to draw, but it makes me think of what you'd hear about, like how in NWA or in the Beatles, they were always trying to top each other with the songs they write. Be like, whoa, that's amazing. I have to bust my ass to do something better. And we in Chicago had this guy named Dwayne Kennedy who was kind of like like our Elvis or our Aretha Franklin. Like he was this person he would just casually destroy, and his ideas were so great, and he would do jokes about slavery and do jokes about like uh, um, uh, food, and then a joke about segregation, and everyone would laugh with the same kind of relaxed mood you'd have if someone was just going like, my wife won't listen to me, or some garbage premise. So I kind of, without knowing it, had this, when you think about how you if you in sports like archery or pitching a ball or something, when you're at your most relaxed, your most zen, that's kind of how you do the best. And so since we never, I always think about this, like if I started out in probably Los Angeles, I'd probably be terrible now, or like, I would have gone through a major crisis. But in kind of the easygoing, well, we're all screw up, so screw it kind of atmosphere of Chicago, but at the same time, without realizing we were writing this amazing stuff, um, you know, we basically that was the beginning. So I was very lucky to have where I started Be Chicago with that group of people.
Yeah, just curious, where is Dwayne now?
Dwayne is always working. He's always he just recorded a new album. He's
Great.
written on a ton of stuff. Uh, he's kind of like your go-to hilarious hired gun, and I think that's where he's happy. And he was that guy who like never really had a lot of ambition, but he's kind of gotten some at this point in his life, which I'm very happy about because he's just one of those guys who, he was so funny. I never worried about him, but I always wanted more people to know who he was.
Right.
We all did.
Yeah. Did you do improv at the Second City or IO or one of the other ones?
IO, IO is
Yeah.
where I started. I studied under Del Close
Oh,
literally
great.
months before he died.
Oh,
Back
wow.
in '88. Yeah. Yeah, and then it's funny they added a sixth level, and he was level 5, and I wasn't very flush money wise. I was a waiter, and I was kind of like, well, like then they're like, well, you can work at the bar, and I was like, I'm not gonna lug kegs for, and I kind of snapped. I was like, I just studied under Yoda, man. Like who's the sixth? This is just you tacking on. My buddy Rob had a funny thing about Second City about how there was. I remember back in the day there was like, I'm screwing it up, but it's like level A through F, and there was like level 1 through 6 after that.
Hmm.
And my buddy Rob said to a teacher, you're missing out on a whole group of Roman numerals for getting more money out of us. And they didn't think that was funny at all. And I remember that being the very improv took itself very seriously. So my improv teacher called me, and he's a good guy, and he was like, "Look, they're taking you off your improv team unless you take level 6." And I was like, "No dice, thanks," and hung up. And that I call my Moriarty moment. That was my "you'll never hear my name again." That was my like when as I describe it, I turned to the dark side of the force, like my turned red, where I was basically like, I'm doing stand up, fuck improv. And I had no animosity toward them, but it was also like I was so happy to be free of it, to just kind of be a one man band, which is kind of what I always wanted to be anyway. I loved improv. I still love improv. I took lessons at UCB when I got to LA just to tighten the screws. Excuse me, when they got to LA, I was here first, but um, it's not a world I necessarily want to go back with, but I respect it hugely. But that was, I definitely stopped cold at one point for sure.
It seems like you use it pretty well in your stand up, like just being able to be good on your feet.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. That's one of those things I've always been pretty decent at, like just kind of being in the moment and recognizing that, well, this thing has to keep going. So your feelings don't matter right now, and what you wanted to happen doesn't matter right now. So get over it. My parents are both teachers,
Hmm.
and they kind of a lot of it is thinking on the fly, and power perceived is power achieved. So you have to, even if you forget your lines in a play, there were times in plays I would make up lines, and then the other actors kind of nod like, well, this is new, I'm horrified, where are you going with this? And then you remember the rest of your line, and then you whoop and go right back into it. But I remember I was in a play and I was wearing like colonial pants or something, or like 1800s pants that button up the side, and I did this thing where I fell over a table and I stood up real fast, and it was part of the play, and my pants just popped, like all the snaps unsnapped on the side of my hip.
That's so
And
perfect for you.
oh yes, it was a great thing, but I was like 14 and horrified, and I
Of
grabbed
course.
the snaps on the side of my leg, and the next line was the guy was like, "Well, do we have a deal?" And he puts his hand out, and I said, "Yes, but forgive me, my pants unsnapped. I must resnap them before we make this bargain." And it got a huge laugh from the audience, and that was one of those moments where I was like, "Oh." I didn't recognize it at the time, but looking back, I kind of realized the great thing about live anything is that the audience is as involved as you are. You're steering the
Yes.
boat, but everyone's on the boat. So they really love it when you're just staying. One of the worst things in the world is, in terms of being an audience member, is seeing a comedian just plow through material they've done hundreds of times because they know it does well, and you can't fake it. I've said this a lot, but there was a line I read in a book about a defense attorney where he just said the truth just sounds different in a court of law, where someone is like, that guy did it, and everyone's like, wow, like, well, I believe that this person's guilty. It's the same thing when you're kind of going, like the big trope comedians do is go, when that happens, do what I do. And you're kind of like, you never do that. You don't. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine. Fantasy's great, exaggeration's great. But when you have that moment where you kind of break and say something real, it's solidified in that moment for everyone, and it's magic, you know.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about. They love seeing somebody think on their feet. They don't really get much excitement out of somebody just reciting something that they've memorized.
Yeah.
Not a bar mitzvah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you, it sounds like, are a pretty ambitious person, unlike Dwayne. Did you leave Chicago for LA, or did you tour, or how did you embark on your stand-up career?
Oh, I left Chicago with kind of nothing. I mean, I thought I was a decent stand-up, but I was just like, I'm almost at the end of my 20s. I have to do something. I'm like a hamster on a wheel. I'm deeply unhappy. I've had a lot of fun in Chicago, but at the same time, I think I've just had a lot of fun, and I haven't really built any kind of foundation. I haven't gone toward my dream. So myself and a friend moved out here together, and this is after years of everyone telling me don't come to LA unless you have like a writing packet and a solid hour and stuff. And I just was like, I just have to go. I'm sorry if I don't have that. And it turns out you really don't need that. You'll just work various jobs for a few years and hopefully get a career out of it. And I did, because it was kind of I came for the accessibility, the entertainment industry, and the connections you can find, the relationships you can build. But I've also kind of come to love Los Angeles for its the fact that it's such a multifaceted place. So it turned out to be good. I hated it the first couple of years, but I'm glad that I came. So it was really like when I made that move with nothing to LA was kind of where I, in a sense, got serious, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And how many years would you say you were just sort of bouncing around odd jobs?
Well, let's see. I got here 2003, and it wasn't until, boy, I worked in a bunch of commercials, 2004 and five, but
That's
that
good.
was kind of, it's great, but it just pays bills, and it's a little, all of this is, commercial on some level, but it's not something you leave and the I was about to say you leave and feel good about, and that's not true. The cool thing was, I'm very lucky that I'm not a handsome actor, that I wasn't like Excedrin. It works. The end. Like nothing like that. I was always the buffoon.
Right.
I got to improvise. I got to play around. So as much as I kind of look back and poo-poo those days, it was training. You did learn how a set works. You learned how to be in front of a camera and stuff. And I took acting classes. So to answer your question, but it didn't. Nothing really took hold until 2007. That's when I went to Just for Laughs and signed with a manager who is now my ex-manager and currently my wife.
Ah,
So that's when things, quote unquote, started to get rolling.
yeah, no, I can see why that would happen.
Hmm.
Based in LA, do you go on tour a lot? Are you kind of a road comic now, or do you stay in LA a lot of the time?
I'd say I'm here 2/3 of the time and a third on the road. So I definitely make the bulk of my living from touring. And then there's projects I've sold or that are in development that I will, you get paid for writing. And there's acting. And acting's great, but I always like to say it's like winning a scratch ticket. It's not completely uncommon, but it's generally rare. And I still to this day do not know how anyone makes a steady living just from acting. Well, I do, but it's complete luck of the draw. It's really like about getting on a show, getting be made into a series regular, and then that show getting syndication, and then you can make a living that goes on for the rest of your life. But just kind of job to job, it's crazy. I don't know how people. I mean, I know actors who have families, and I think it's to me, it's like they're juggling while they're on a unicycle and making it look easy. But for everyone else, it's it's just insane. I think mostly because everyone wants to be an actor and and get that attention and be famous and stuff. And the great thing about being a stand-up is uh, the proof is always in the pudding. People know within a couple minutes if you know what you're doing or not, and that's a bit more of a rarefied air, at least in terms of making a living at it. I remember when I was in Vermont over the New Year's Eve weekend, I was waiting to go on stage, and the host was a little nervous, and I leaned against the wall and I yawned because I'd been walking around all day with my wife, and she just laughed out loud. She was like, "Do you ever get nervous?" And I was like, "Oh, every time." But also, you have this thing in you where it's almost like muscle memory, where you're kind of treasuring the fact, as weird as it sounds, that it could go horribly wrong. It always could, but you kind of build up an awareness of that and kind of roll with it. Whereas, you could take anyone, coach them enough, and they could be a passably decent actor depending on the role, if that makes any sense. So it's yeah.
When you do bomb, like that doesn't hurt you, does it? Like it's just a thing that happens, or do you in the back of your mind worry like, oh my god, my career is over?
I don't worry my career is over, but I hate it. I hate when I do. But the thing that people forget is, generally speaking, the audience is on your side.
Right.
They want to have a good time. They're not looking for you to eat shit. With the exception of couple instances where you have like 50 comics on the bill and it's like Battle of the Comedians or some horse shit comedy competition or something. Generally speaking, they want you to do well. So if I set up, I did a bit a week ago that just got nothing and ended it with, well, that's the first time I've tried that. Thanks for being here and being part of my lab test or something. I got a laugh from that.
Right.
Because they're with you. They're like, well, fuck, swing and a miss. At least you owned it.
Unself-conscious play.
Mm-hmm.
And you seem particularly comfortable in your own skin. Like you go out there and own the way you look and talk about how awkward you are and how tall and how people might perceive you as just like a total goof or a weirdo or whatever. And that's great that you found that you figured out what your persona is kind of based on that. Was that a long time coming, or did you kind of nail that? Did you already have that as the high school class clown?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of uh, I feel like George Carlin nailed it when he was just like, he didn't make the team, but Blair, it's you were never good at sports, you're never good at that, this, that, or the other, but you made people feel good
Yeah.
by making fun of them or yourself or whatever. I will say, I I I feel like I leaned into that in some of my specials about like being awkward or looking weird or whatever, and it's like I don't look that weird. And that's I'm kind of just dumping on myself because a lot of times you'll see a comedian, they'll be like, I know Brent Weinbach has a great bit about that, about going, I know what you're thinking. And it's like, you don't know what the audience is thinking. Someone might find you incredibly handsome right now. You don't know. It's you when you go and shit on yourself, you're kind of assuming the audience is already shitting on you. And that's what comedians kick ourselves to death. There's nothing you can say to us that we haven't said to ourselves. There's no thing a heckler could yell that would hurt me more than I've hurt me already, in a sense. Um, but it's like, don't assume everyone feels that way. That's kind of why you love someone who might not be the most attractive person getting up there and talking about how beautiful they are or something, and not as a joke, like they kind of believe it, kind of thing. But yeah, I just feel like I make fun of myself and my looks and my manner and my gait and everything because it's like I kind of find it funny, and I just want everyone to kind of calm down and relax, about it. Where it's like, don't. I mean, I make fun of having a weak chin and stuff, and people kind of laugh or go, but I'll go, oh, come on. And I'll follow that up with like, no, it's made me a lot of money. It's fine. It's
Yeah,
fine.
no, it's
I'm cool being if you put me in a uniform of any kind, it's hilarious. Like I've been cast as so many cops and firemen or park rangers, but like they're all terrible. Like I'm never the guy who saves the day. I'm the cop who gets shot in the first frame of the movie, and the rest of the movie, they're like, we got to do it for Rusty. Poor old dumb Rusty, shot in the face right away at the crack house. It's like, and I'm fine with that. I think it's
If
hilarious.
only you had been around when Stripes was made. You could have been
Oh,
one of the cadets.
absolutely. I would love to be an idiot who goes under a tank or
It's
something and then it's forgotten
it's
about.
kind of a Harlan Williams look. I'm sure you've heard that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have a very similar. Thankfully he's much more of a Southern man than I
Right.
am, and much more of a country guy. But yeah, we have a very very similar look for sure, at least especially chin wise.
Yeah, but you do that thing where you sort of acknowledge the way that you perceive yourself and try to make a connection with the audience, disarm them a little bit. You do that from a genuine place. It's not one of these stand-up cliches where, like you said, you get up and say, "I know what you're thinking." Did Matthew
Right.
McConaughey and Whoopi Goldberg have or
Yes.
whatever the?
That's it.
So it's
Yeah.
just it feels very genuine when you do it.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
good work.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your process a little bit. Your jokes feel natural and they feel very improvised, but listening to them, you can tell they're written very carefully. And I'm wondering how
Yeah.
much writing you do and sort of what your process is for writing, or do you workshop stuff live when you're performing and then remember it?
Live, I think it's just like how you uh, tell a story a lot in your life, and then you can tell it back to front at a certain point. That's kind of how I form jokes and cadences and rhythm and the beats of it. Yeah, it's kind of like sculpture, like having a rock that you think, oh, there's something in here that's really funny. What is it? And rather than carving it, it's almost like throwing it against a wall again and again and again until it gets to like a shape you want it in. But it's got to start with, I think that's kind of why you call it material, because it's got to start with something that made you laugh or made someone laugh. I was just in the car with my wife and I said, my mom will just say something casually that makes me want to tear the skin off my head. And my wife started laughing really hard and was like, "That's such a horrible thing. It's so funny because it's horrible." And I was like, "Yeah, it's because no one gets their hooks in you like your mom." And so now it's like, okay, so that's, and I haven't said that on stage yet, and who knows if I'll just abandon it or I'll go back to it. But you know, it kind of just starts with something that makes you laugh. I always tell comics that are starting out, they're like, "Well, how do you develop your material?" I'm like, just talk about stuff that makes you laugh, and don't worry about the audience. Don't look at an audience and go, oh, I know what they like. They want me to talk about Brexit, or they want me to talk about how Amazon mistreats its workers. These look like some lefties. Talk about what you think is funny, and if you find that those things funny and you can work with them, great. But don't be so emboldened idiotically to think you know what is in anyone else's head. Go with what you think is funny and find a connection there. Because generally speaking, uh, there's going to be people in the audience that find it funny too. So it's just kind of starts with that, and then I go from there.
Yeah, and even if you don't, like by happenstance, you get a crowd where there's not many of those people, then you don't do well. And like you said, at least you're being honest, you're being yourself, and you move on. And
Right.
eventually you
Yeah.
find the people who like what you do.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
so I'm impressed that you've put together all this stuff, and obviously you've been doing this a long time. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I didn't know that you were developing
Thanks.
shows and selling pilots and
Hmm.
acting. I'm have
Sure.
probably seen you in commercials or whatever, bit parts on TV, and I just didn't ever notice it. But that's great.
Well, it's interesting. Thank you. I mean, I describe my level of fame as people don't know if they saw me on TV or if we went to high school
Right.
together. That's literally the level. I mean, I had a guy like hug me in a mall. It was like, it's been so long, and I said, since when? And he was like, oh, Chelsea lately. My bad, dude. I thought
So funny.
it was really so. I've done a ton of things, and it is that I get a lot of looks where like, what do I know you from? And it's great. It's flattering. I don't have for most people, unless you're like a super Marvel nerd. I was on Agent Carter. I was Dr. Samberly,
Sweet.
and so yeah, no, it's great. It I, I have a bit where my friend, who's much more a nerd than I am, was like, "You're in the Marvel universe," and I was like, "Well," and he's like, "No, look it up on Wiki, on Marvel Wiki," and I did, and it has your picture, it has the character's name, and it has a signature quote, and I'm basically doing a bit out of my act now, but Captain America's quote is, uh, "We're not asking for permission, and we're way beyond asking for forgiveness. Earth just lost her greatest defender, so we're here to fight. And if you're in our way, well, then we'll fight you too." Hardcore. My character's quote, Dr. Aloysius Samberly, his quote is, "I'm doing my best."
That's perfect.
It's so great. No one who's doing well has ever said they're doing their best, ever. That's something you say after you knock over a bunch of like stock shelves in the back room where they've put you.
That's perfect.
So I just I just pop up here and there. The great thing is all of these roles I've gotten, for the most part, I was just supposed to be in one episode, and then the writers kept writing me in because I guess I'm fun to play with, like a Raggedy Andy or something. But it's flattering. So, but I don't have that, like Ted Danson has Sam. He'll always be Sam.
Right.
I don't have a thing like that. But who knows someday? But it's great. It's really fun to get acting work. I was just on Fuller House. I just did a thing on Superstore. It's a good. Yeah, I love acting. It's where I started. So it's fun to go play with people and play make 'em ups.
Yeah, and I'm sure like who wouldn't want to work with you? You're like the Tom Hanks of goofy comedians.
Oh man, I'm taking that quote. Thank you.
Yeah, that goes in the back of
Yeah.
the memoir.
And it's funny, just to give my wife credit real quick. She was the one who I used to go in these auditions and prepare like a voice or a way of walking or all this stuff. And she kind of was like, "Babe, you're no offense, but Christian Bale." And that's when it hit me. I was like, "Oh no, she's right. I need to go into these roles acting as if this character is my body,
Yeah.
my voice." And that's when I really started doing what I feel is really good work, rather than acting is not being a chameleon. It's being, what if you were not born as yourself, you were born as this person, but you still look and act like you, if that makes any
Totally.
sense.
No, yeah, but
You change it up a little, but when she told me I wasn't Christian Bale, I was like, at first pissed, but then it was hilarious. Like, it's so
it's
true.
great. And you probably get that from improv, the whole thing about staying in character and playing it straight.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Playing to the height of your intelligence.
Yep.
If you know how to dance, actually dance.
Yep.
If you can, do a language, do a language. If you can't, don't. Stop fucking around.
Yeah, so there's so many people who want to do all those things, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what's the secret to getting those things? Was it literally just paying your dues, doing improv and stand-up, and then going out and digging ditches for so many years, getting an agent, just like going through the process? Or are there some secrets to that business that would help people to know?
It's funny. It's kind of like there was a comic that I used to read when I was a kid, and it was a character named Longshot, and his whole superpower was that he was lucky, and but he could only be lucky if he had purification of motive, was the thing. So if he wanted to win the lottery, he couldn't win the lottery. But if he saw a little kid walking out on the highway and he was running to save the kid, he would catch the kid and they'd both live. So he was lucky for the sake of the right thing. I think, not to say more people need purification of motive, but it's really, you got to sit yourself down and go, why do I want this? And if you want it to be famous and you want it to get laid, and you want to get rich, you're going to end up unhappy at some point. But if you do it because you have a genuine, I won't even say a gift, because I feel like you can work hard and find a comedic voice. I think it was Stephen King said talent is the most overrated thing, and it's you have to develop your talent into skill. And Dan Harmon had the best analogy for it, which is when you're a kid and you're kind of wandering around, your mother says, if you get lost, don't wander around, just stay where you are. We will find you. We're going to find you. Just hug a tree and sit there. Don't wander off. So it's about just being undeniably talented, so that people find you. Definitely put as much out there as you can, as much good stuff out there as you can, gig as much as you can, write, film things, fail, but it's just about kind of getting found and hopefully getting a making a living and getting your voice out there. And really, the best thing for me is collaborating with other people that I am in awe of, that I think are fantastic, that I love working with. I being a, a a kind of a basic guy in a lot of ways. I love action movies and you know, thrillers and I love badasses because I'll never be a badass. I'm not a tough guy, but I kind of compare it to being like a cowboy or a samurai, male or female. And there are these people that you kind of, there's a scene in the Seven Samurai where these casual, like Magnificent Seven Samurai are great because it's just these people who are casual badasses. Like they're amazing at what they do, but they don't have any ego about it. They're just like, this is what I'm good at. And there's a scene in Seven Samurai where there's this guy who's like tossing his weight around and I'll kill everybody. I'm a badass. And you know he's not. He's full of hot air. But he grabs his samurai sword and the other guy who's an actual badass is like, stop right now. I just saw the way you grabbed your handle. I'm going to kill you, man. Don't do it. Please. And he's asking like, don't make me murder you. And the guy's like, you know, screw you, and takes the sword out and gets killed like immediately. And I think it's like that when you get to a certain point as a comedian, as a performer, you kind of recognize each other. You know the toil you've been through, you know the hell you've been through to get to as good as you want to be. And I'm still not nowhere near as good as I want to be, but I want to get better. I want to improve. I want to make people happier more. And I think I feel sorry in a sense for people who blew up on YouTube and all of a sudden, just because they'll probably be okay. I'm sure they have way more money than I do, but they're going to do a lot of scrambling to kind of get as good as they kind of should be. And I'm glad I never had that access. I'm glad I was never like a YouTube star in my 20s. I'm way too immature. I'd probably have developed a massive drug habit or something. You know?
Oh, it's great advice. You do see a lot of those people crash and burn. And
yeah,
part of it is, well, there's this analogy I always think of, which is like a bear has deadly claws, and any animal that has a deadly anything, like a snake's poisonous fangs, for example, they developed those deadly weapons over, you know, millions of years of evolution. So it developed slowly and naturally. So now they use them as if they have been expertly trained by the top firearms handlers in the world, because they only use them to threaten, to make sure they're safe, or if they really have to, if they're in a life or death situation, they'll do the, you know, an instinctual calculation of, okay, I must use them now. And they all do it well. But if you get famous on YouTube, that's like handing a chimp a gun.
That's really good. Yeah, it's so true. You have this immediate power, and I mean, who in their teens and 20s on some level wasn't in love with themselves? On some level.
I know, and then to get that validation like that would screw you up big.
Oh my God. As a heterosexual white male only child,
yes,
that killed me. Oh my God. The privilege I already enjoy to get that, man, oh God, as much as I have these fears eating at me about remaining afloat or you know, those weak moments where you go, why aren't I further than I am? Boy, you've given me a lot of perspective.
Oh, it's funny. You would have become like, it would have changed your comic persona, because you would have been like the insufferable asshole as opposed to the lovable, goofy guy.
Yeah, well, and yeah, thanks. Well, you know, when I was first in LA, I was doing well, but I was also, a lot of my act, and I still do yell, but I was yelling almost my entire set, to the point where I was like, I look back on those days and I'm like, oh, stop, you know. So I probably would have been the yelling guy. I would have been on YouTube yelling at people that they're stupid or something.
That could have been your thing.
Oh God. And there would have been a point where I reached 70 years old, God willing, and someone been like, hey, aren't you the yelling guy? And I was like, that's a long time ago. And now I live in a boat. Leave me alone.
Right. The essence of your advice is great. It's that, like, if you don't love it now while you're not making money at it, you're not going to love it anymore when you're making money at it.
Yeah. And there's no reason why you shouldn't love it, but there's going to be a lot of pain, and
Of
it's
course.
brutal. I mean, comedy is one of those things that we all kind of, I think, hate saying the word comedy and talk about comedy as if it's a thing because it's ethereal, because it's something anyone in a sense can do. You know, we're not talking about uh, ballet or math or chess. It's something that people it's low art, and I think that's its weakness and its strength in a way. Uh, so I mean, I saw a comic last night, Alison Liebley, who's great, and she told this joke that I thought was brilliant, and it didn't get a laugh, and I laughed, and she after the joke she went, "That's a brilliant joke. Fuck you guys." And like after you know, I was so proud because she's probably 10 years younger than me or more, but we were talking about it, I was like, "That is a brilliant joke," and you kind of as much as we're in competition in a sense. I mean, I really love comedians. I really love watching people perform. But there is that part of you that's just like, I want to do better than anyone. you know, that like, like that, and that kind of drives you. But it's weird. People think we're all at each other's throats, but we're pretty much rooting for each other because we're kind of we're kind of what we have. It's not all we have, but we have each other to understand. I mean, that's kind of why a lot of us call non-comedians civilians, and
I,
it's tongue in cheek, but it's also kind of not.
yeah, you're kind of like the sheepdog and the coyote in those old Warner Brothers cartoons who punch in and
Oh yeah.
they're at war.
Morning, Frank. Morning, Ralph. Yeah, for sure.
So, do you do any writing? It seems like you do just about everything else. You must be writing pilots and developing ideas, but do you do any like prose writing?
Oh yeah. I'm halfway through, a little more than halfway through a book actually. I last year I wrote a book of short stories that got taken out, and it all the publishers really liked it, but just didn't feel like, you thought it was a weird sell to be like, hey, here's a comedian with a book of some funny, some not kind of short stories. But the feedback that it's kind of like going into auditions where, boy, they loved you, but the producer thinks you're too tall or
Right.
whatever. But it sucks. Look, it sucks. It always sucks, the rejection. But one reason you kind of keep going is so they remember you. I spent the last quarter of the year last year pitching this show that was rock solid and everyone loved it. But in the end, they were just like, we can't find a place for it. You don't have a big enough star attached. All of things I understand, but they really liked me,
What
and
was
they
the
really
what
hated
was
me in my pitch.
what was the show?
Well, it was about my friends. I don't want to talk about too much because I don't want to give the idea away for someone who's paying attention to this or something.
Got it.
It was based on a friend's wife and her experiences teaching at an experimental school. And his wife said to him, "What if Bronger was doing what I'm doing?" And my friend was like, "Oh, that's hilarious." And we started writing it from there. And it also, my parents are teachers, so I know that world to an
Right.
extent. It was always like a fear of mine to have to kind of go teach like my parents did, even though it's a noble calling and it's amazing. I just hate how teachers are kicked around. Um, so yeah, it was basically about that. But basically, yeah, I'm kind of always working on something. I feel like a lot of me runs on fear of getting losing my career, getting forgotten, and getting complacent. I really don't know anyone who's successful in this business who's like, I'm done. That's it. I did it. Made it. Done. You talk to the most successful of any of my friends, they're just like, fuck. Oh God. What's next? Or, oh God, I'm a hack or whatever. Um, and it keeps you humble, but it also keeps the juices flowing. And you just got to remind yourself that you kind of do this for fun. So anyway, the now I'm working on this book that was kind of based on a weekend I spent with a female comedian opening for me, who's hilarious, and kind of our experiences together, and looking at it from your older white guy and your younger female comedian, and we were shared a lot of perspectives, and also came across a certain degree of toxic masculinity from this small town, which I didn't I always shrug off, but I kind of learned to shrug it off less when I saw how it kind of affected her. And it was also during the time of when the Louis C.K. stuff started kind of boiling over,
Mm.
which is something I always kind of heard but never really thought about. Maybe because I'm a guy and he wouldn't whip his dick out in front of me anytime we'd ever be around each other. And it was kind of like Bill Cosby, you know. From what I heard about Bill Cosby, is he liked. I thought he was. What I heard, he was handsy. He like grabbed women's boobs, which is terrible, but it wasn't to the degree that we now know it is. And so that's how much men are aware, or B, make their own selves pay attention to something that will never affect them, if that makes any sense. So anyway, it's just kind of me working on that book is something that, if I'm working on my jokes, if I'm working on a script, if I'm working on a project to pitch, and I hit a wall, I always go back to this book and go, all right, well, what else happened with this stuff going on? And it's therapeutic, you know, because I mean, I love just fucking off. I love hanging out, drinking with friends, watching TV, watching a movie, eating snacks. I love it.
Yeah, it's
But it's things I have to push away from it to stay vital, I guess. You know.
yeah, no, it's impressive that you're such a hard worker because that comes through in your act that you're
Thank you.
a guy who likes to party and drink and, you know,
Yeah,
hang out with buds or whatever.
sure.
Have you considered self-publishing that first book? Because I'm sure the fans would love to read those stories.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting idea. Um, I mean, the lit agent I was working with had me uh change the protagonists of each one to my name. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a Matt in each story, and it's kind of a guess if it happened or if it didn't, because a lot of them are true and a lot of them are totally not.
I see.
And so I was like, I think what I would do though is go back and change all the names to different names, because I didn't write them all from my perspective. They're from all kinds. So I think I would. It's not a bad idea to kind of go back and maybe do it. It's a possibility. It's look, it's all backed up on my hard drive, so it exists.
Yeah,
So right.
it's in the bank. You're good. You're in the
Yes, sir.
vault.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. So, what's your kind of big goal or plan? And before you answer that, I'm curious to know if you had one prior to now. Did you plan or have goals to get where you are now, or were you just like going down the hill and seeing where you end up?
I mean, I kind of just do what I love, and try to do it as often as I can within sanity and health, and maintaining healthy relationships. I've only started setting goals in the last couple of years, and they're mostly kind of to do with my marriage, and maybe my health a little bit, and in terms of just goalposts in the business. But there's no massive end game. I love my wife because she has like a fixed number, I think, where she's just and I'm done. Because she's worked hard her whole life, and she's like kind of one of those people who's always had a job, and she's very she's very much a planner, and has always been on top of her shit. And being in her proximity, to say nothing of being married to her, has made me get way more on top of my shit, to the point where I realized how much I wasn't on my shit for so many years. So I don't have a thing. And for a long time, I used to go, I want that guy's career, where it's like at this point, I could be like, I want to be John C. Riley if he did stand up, or I want to be Eddie Izzard. He plays to stadiums, and he does whatever acting role he wants, and he wears amazing clothes. But the problem with that is there was my friend Katie Dippold, who wrote The Heat and wrote on Mad TV when I was on there. She wrote a hilarious sketch that I was on, probably the funniest thing I was in Mad TV, which was called Weight Smashers, which was a guy who pulls his pants out to show how much weight he lost, but he keeps showing his genitals. Like he keeps putting the waist level below his crotch.
That's
and
a
it's
good bit.
It's so, and the director just keeps going, cut, stop it. And he's just excited that he can see his genitals again. He wants to show everyone. And so Kate wrote that, but she told me this time where she was with an ex-boyfriend. I believe she's married now. I haven't talked to her in a while, but she was with this guy, and they were at a party, and a mutual friend of ours went up to the both of them, put his arm around both of them, was like, you know what? You guys are so great and so in love. I love your relationship. You're the best. And he had no idea. They were literally going to break up that week. They were no longer in love. They were no longer together. So it's all perception. So I could say like, oh, I want that guy's career. He might be miserable. He might hate his life. I don't know. So I would rather have wherever I'm going than anyone else's. It's easy for me to say because I'm making okay living, and I got stuff on the horizon here and there, as much as it's frustrating. But I think it's good to have a vision board. It's good to write down goals because then you aim for them, and if you miss, whatever. But it's a good way to measure things. So I think it's more goals rather than here's the end. Here's what I want to achieve in full. If that,
Yeah, it's not a certain point in the future that once I get there, I'm going to be happy. It's more like I want to stay on top of this, and I want to be good at this. And what you said about just having it be your journey and not comparing it to anyone else's, that's like, an incredibly healthy thing. It sounds like based on your stand-up, it seems like you've been single a lot and, not in a relationship a lot. And that's one of the best things you can get from a marriage. It sounds like you found it is somebody who like makes you better,
Oh yeah, no, she's definitely made me better. It's interesting. I just taped a late night set to submit because I haven't done a late night set in, I don't know, 6-7 years or something insane. You only get 5 minutes, and I'm mostly story based, but one of the bits is about how much of a jerk my wife is, but she's a hilarious jerk. Like she'll say mean stuff that makes me laugh really hard because I'm just, I like, as a comedian, we all put each other down. We say terrible things to each other, but like she'll just casually say it, and because I love her and because I know where she's coming from. When she just, calls me fat donger across an IKEA, it just makes me laugh. Because it's just like, don't say that. What and then I have a guy next to me who's like, your name is Fat Donger? Yes, that's my name. Or when we're having dinner with a couple, and this woman is like, so you guys think about having a kid? And my wife's like, I kind of want a kid with a chin. Like, I'm sitting right here, but Christ, that was funny. But it's this thing where she is, like I said, my ex-manager, and she works in the business, and she reps amazing people: Rob Delaney, Liza Schlesinger, Reggie Watts, Aparna Nancherla, Sam J. All these people who are very different and very hilarious, but she motivates them and motivates like me kind of the same way. But I'm like her biggest fan. I'm the one who's like telling her she can do something, when she's doubting herself or whatever. And we both give each other perspective, where it's kind of like as much as this business will literally drive you insane, you need something or someone to kind of go, don't let this ruin you here. You need to calm down and take a great big breath and just let it go, kind of thing.
That sounds great. It sounds like you really are good for each other. So congratulations for finding that.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And congratulations on all your success. It's really been fun to talk to you.
It's been awesome talking to you, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to the How to Write Funny podcast. For more tips and tricks and inspiration, if you're trying to write comedy or get into comedy, go to howtowritefunny.com.